The most frequent problems I have already addressed, the issues with tone, the issues with rushing and dragging, and I hope you've watched those earlier videos and figured out some strategies on how to solve those for your group. I'm going to be talking about some other issues here that weren't covered in those areas. One of the things that I hear right off the bat are, like right here in measure 15, cellos and basses that forget the key signature and they play C sharp instead of C natural. And that's, you'd say, well, that's for a piece of this difficulty, that should be unexcusable for this, but I still hear it more frequently than you would guess. So make sure that the students understand the finger patterns on the A string and that it's a minor pattern, that they're not missing notes. F sharps are also an issue. The major pattern or the 2-3 pattern on the D string can be an issue for some students anyway. Getting that F sharp high enough, getting that whole step between E and F sharp is a struggle for a lot of students, and it takes a lot of time to develop that finger pattern consistently and develop a culture of tuning within your ensemble. The way this piece is orchestrated, a lot of those times, the F sharps, like here in the first violins, are played against an E a whole step away harmonically. So for students that are already struggling to play F sharp in tune, that's going to be compounded when trying to play it in tune against a dissonance. A cool way to practice this is going to be to have all of your students play the finger pattern on the D string. So open D, E, F sharp, and get the F sharp nice and in tune, and then have everybody but the first violins come back down to E while the first violins are still playing the F sharp. And that way you can hear that dissonance, and as long as the first violins don't move their finger, their F sharp should still be in tune, and the E is going to be a lot easier to tune for most players than the F sharp, and they can start hearing what that in tune dissonance should sound like. So it's kind of a backwards way of doing it. Go up to the F sharp and then add the dissonance, rather than everybody starting on E and then going up to F sharp that way. Because the problem is the F sharp. So we want to establish the F sharp and then complicate it. Start from simple to more complex. But again, if you're just looking at the rubric and you're trying to figure out how to classify this piece of music and you think, well, it's just the major and minor patterns and really there's no third position stuff because the cellos can do this thing in second position, and for some reason when basses go to third position, that's expected because they start doing it in book one. So it's no big deal, but yeah, they have the major pattern, but can they play the major pattern along with dissonance? These complexities do make a difference, and that doesn't always show up on the rubric. So 2+ is, maybe even an understatement. I could definitely see in other areas how this could be a grade 3, and I definitely know grade 3s that are easier to teach than this piece. Your orchestra is really going to have a mastery of fourth finger and violins and violas. For the first violins, they've got no choice. They've got B's on the E string frequently. So that if they don't have a good fourth finger, that's not going to go well. There's a lot of places where we need to play fourth finger E's on the A string and second violins. If we're playing open E's here in 40, 41, that's not going to be the move. That's not going to sound great. Open E, whole note here in 42. Yes, we are coming down from F sharp, but fortissimo to mezzo forte, setting up that pizzicato section here at 42, again, that's probably not going to work very well. We probably need to use fourth finger, and we also probably need to be able to vibrate. Now, if your students don't have a good left hand shape, fourth finger is going to be a problem. There's really not a reason why fourth finger should be any more difficult than the other fingers. The problem is the students tend to squeeze with the left hand. We got to get them to loosen up, and we got to get them to keep everything round and have tabletops here so they can put down their fourth finger with enough strength, because if their finger's flat, they lose a lot of power. Round fingers are strong, and they can transfer that weight because they're not squeezing and sending the weight back into this part of the hand, back towards the scroll. We get them to loosen up and relax, and we transfer the weight onto the fourth finger. Now, in season 1, episode 2, I have an entire episode on left hand tone. But just generally speaking, there are some exercises that can help to loosen up the hand. And one of them is the pull-up exercise. So you can have them relax and come down, then pull up to the fourth finger, relax and pull up to the fourth finger. Now that's going to give them some space in between the hand and the neck, because they shouldn't have that contact with the knuckle right here. They should be able to have a space that goes all the way through. Otherwise, their weight's always going to be back in the hand instead of on that fourth finger. So that's a good exercise that you can use to get them to loosen up if they're getting stiff. And you can use that at any point in the rehearsal. If you're hearing fourth finger notes and they sound weak, or your students look like they're becoming tense, just stop it and say, all right, let's stop. We're going to do some pull-ups, okay? Ready? Up, down, and just get them to relax and get rid of that tension. Some of the issues that we have with the fourth finger is that students don't press firmly enough. We've got to make sure that they press down the string hard enough. And if they have good technique, it's going to make that easier. I'd also like to talk about E string tone, because there's a lot of material where first violins are required to play on the E string, and it's lyrical and it's higher in the violin than the rest of the orchestra, the rest of the piece, but it's just supposed to be strong and flow over the top of the orchestra. If we're getting bad tone on the E string because we don't have a straight bowing path, students aren't set up correctly, and they're not able to keep a straight bow, it's not going to go over very well. It's not going to bring out the character of this piece of music. For instance, right here in measure 30, you've got your first violins playing fourth finger B for 7 counts, and then dropping the octave for the B up bow, which is going to create its own problems later. You might want to break that bowing. But let's say you are playing all 7 counts down bow. Okay, well, you're playing that, and you're bowing down, and all of a sudden, boom, your students hit the bow on their leg because their leg's in the way. And it's like, oh, well, we'll move your foot. Oh, but their case is in the way, so they can't move their foot. Oh, well, so what do they do next? Okay, well, I'm going to bow around the leg, and then the bow goes towards the fingerboard. And if you watched my video on tone for this episode, you'll know that that's not going to work very well. So we got to make sure that we can have a bowing path where we're not hitting the chair, we're not hitting our leg, we're not moving around the leg. We can either drop the knee and have room to bow on the outside of the leg, or we can move the foot so we can bow on the inside of the leg, in between the legs. We got to pick one or the other. There really isn't a third option. If students aren't set up correctly, if the shoulder rests aren't where they're supposed to be and they're sliding down this way, it's going to compound that problem, because it's going to change the bowing angle on the E string. So we got to make sure that the students' violins and viols are set up where they're supposed to be and the bow path is straight. The idea is to have your orchestra sound rich and full and powerful, not strained and whiny and gross. I mean, this is Ablaze, for heaven's sake. All right, we're done. We're done. No more of this.